So in this video, I want to talk about why it's so difficult to connect the rest of the Halloween series, apart from the 2018 film and Rob Zombie's movies, with the original Halloween. Some of those details and points that fans often try to connect to that movie and have it make sense and say, see, it was always like that. Look. It gets really, it's a slippery slope when you try to do that, and there's reasons why, and so let's talk about it. That movie is a shit show. What you think you see, what you think you hear, that's what it's about. It's all theater of the mind. No, it's garbage. It's garbage. Mood and atmosphere. Now that I really like. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I want to see. Hey folks, how you doing? Dave McRae here. That's right. In this video, that's what I want to talk about. I'm not going to go through that whole rigmarole again, but that's what I want to talk about. So let me start here. Okay. I've been wanting to do this video for quite some time. So here are my thoughts on this. We all know that the original Halloween, and this is not my opinion, this is an objective fact. This is not an opinion. This is the truth. This can be verified. The original Halloween, the intent of that movie was supposed to be a one-off film. It was, like I've often said, this is my own thing, that it was like a 90-minute Twilight Zone Hitchcockian ghost story kind of thing, right? That had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And its moral was when Jamie Lee Curtis says, it was the boogeyman. And yes, that is what she says. I have a video on my channel all about that. It was the boogeyman. And Dr. Loomis says, as a matter of fact, it was. And then he looks over the balcony and he's gone. And then, of course, you hear his breathing and blah, blah, blah. The message of that movie is very clear. There was no need for a sequel. There was nothing in that movie that they were trying to set up a sequel. You could make the argument and say, well, he's gone, you can do a sequel. Well, yes, but he wasn't gone to do a sequel. He was gone to solidify the message, right? Those are two completely different things. The story, there was no more to tell. So those are two completely different things, and what a lot of people fail to understand. Now, when we get to Halloween 2, of course, they do a sequel because it was one of the most successful, if not the most successful, independent movie in motion picture history at that time. So obviously, they do a sequel, Halloween 2 from 1981, which I quite like. It's my second favorite in the series, although I do acknowledge it. In my opinion, it's far inferior to the original. But there's a lot to like there, and there were certain things that Carpenter did, because he wrote that movie, that was very smart. He was ingenious. He had it pick up right where the first one left off. He introduced the brother-sister story arc, which a lot of fans really like. I think it's completely unnecessary, because if you remove the flashback dream that she has about her seeing Michael at the window, and you remove the scene, or the dialogue at the very least, of Marion Chambers talking to Dr. Loomis about Laurie being, his sister, and you just have the movie play out as is, it's great. You can just fill in the blank of your own mind that he's going after her because she got away. He's pissed off. He wants some kind of fucking revenge here, right? You could play it that way. But anyway, the brother-sister arc embedded itself into the pop culture consciousness, and a lot of people love it and were pissed off that the 2018 film removed it. I'm sort of, I don't really care. I like the fact that they were removing the brother-sister arc, because now it goes back to the original intent of the character and the movie. So that was where I sort of sided on that. But this is why it's so difficult. So the problem lies in that because that first movie was so ambiguous, you start to fill in blanks. And it was designed, part two, it's kind of like, okay, that's why Carpenter did all this. So he designed part two in a very specific way, so you could look at things in part one and go, oh. Unfortunately, there's very little of that. And anything that you do becomes so subjective. And it's so subjective that when you try to argue it as fact, I can just easily tear it down, because that was never the intent of the movie, right? Like, there are some people that say, well, you know what? If Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' sister, then she must have been there that night in the crib as a 2-year-old in 1963. Yeah, but she wasn't. No, but she must have been. No, but she wasn't. Yeah, no, but she must have been. No, but she wasn't. Because there's no evidence of a baby being there. There's no evidence of a baby. It's not like you see a stroller in the background, you see a soother on a desk, you see a baby picture hanging on the wall. Nothing. Because there wasn't a baby there. It was just Michael and Judith. That was it. And that's fine. That's fine if you want to fill in your own blanks, and maybe that works. Oh, she must have been there. That's cool. I like that shit. I genuinely do. And I think that's awesome. But you have to argue it from a certain point of view where it's like, hey, think about this. Like, that's how I see it. This is kind of like, that kind of makes sense to me, right? That's cool. But when you start to argue it as concrete fact, it doesn't work because that was never the intention to begin with. It is actually factually not there. And there's nothing that says it was. There are some people that like to argue that there's evidence of Jamie Lee Curtis and, Laurie and Michael actually being brother and sister in the original film, because people like to point to the fact that, well, he's chasing her. Why is he chasing her then? If he's so random, why is he going after her? And then my point to that is, who's to say he's going after her? There's no evidence in Halloween that says that Michael is chasing Laurie. Hear me out. You are watching Halloween from the perspective of our star, our main protagonist, which is usually how you watch, movies play out, right? But we are watching these events through the eyes of Laurie Strode. But there's nothing that happens in Halloween that says the shape is specifically after her, okay? He happens to see her walk up onto the front porch of the Myers house, put the key under the mat. Tommy is, back there, and it's bad timing, right? He sees her and is like, oh, who is this? He's 21 years old. Hormones are raging. He's never had sex. Maybe he's enamored with this young, cute little blonde that comes up to the doorstep, right? He sees a little boy back there and maybe thinks he looks like a little punk idiot, or who knows? I don't know, right? But he's standing there. He's clearly enamored with this young girl. And he goes out there and he watches her, but he's just as enamored with Tommy because, a few scenes later, he's watching Tommy at the school and he follows him, around the corner in the car, and he's just as enamored with Annie, Bob, and Linda because he kills them first. He knows where Laurie went, right? He knows Laurie went to the Doyle house across the street from the Wallace house, but for some reason, Michael goes left instead of right. He knows where Laurie went. If he was after Laurie and Laurie only, he would have just gone into that house. Now, obviously, we know why it didn't transpire that way, because the movie would have been over in 40 minutes. But what I'm saying is, for those of you that argue that, you have to keep in mind, when you look at it from the real, you strip it all away and you look at it for what it really is, which is the objective truth. That's how you get to the objective truth. When Carpenter said, well, this is what the movie was, right? When you look at it from that objective truth, you realize that he was probably infatuated with everybody. He started with Laurie. Oh, she's kind of cute. But then as he followed Laurie around, naturally, Laurie ended up with her friends, so they're collateral damage. Like, everybody's collateral damage to each other. There's nobody specific necessarily that he is more enamored with than the other. He just picked somebody to follow, and anybody else who came into that person's life along the way, he was going to take down, right? So, and that's what ended up happening. Now, then, some people could make the argument, say, but he was across the street in the house trying to lure, Laurie across the street. There's nothing that says that's what he's doing. Now, you can definitely make an argument for that, but there's nothing that says that is what he's doing. Because I can just say, well, who's to say that Laurie just didn't cross the street and go into the house and fuck things up? He was there planting the bodies, doing all this for the cops. He was going to take off. He was putting Linda in the closet and putting Bob here hanging upside down and putting the tombstone there and Annie on the bed, putting her. Then I was like, all right, okay, I'm going to take off. And then all of a sudden he hears, Bob? Annie? And he's like, oh, fuck, bitch, really? You could make that argument. You could make that argument. So that's why it's so difficult to pinpoint details that refer to a much larger picture than what it really is in the later sequels, and try to find evidence of that larger picture in the original Halloween, because it actually doesn't exist. And I see so many people spending so much time and energy, all over the place, whether it's on YouTube or Twitter. I get all kinds of messages. And I just want people to understand that it's important to realize that I think it's fun. I'm not trying to bring down the party. I'm not trying to be a party pooper. I genuinely think it's fun to speculate and look, all that, because we all do that, right? We have to do that. I mean, when there was Halloween 2, it was like, oh, okay, I guess you're telling me this is connected to this. Now I got to go back and find, evidence of this, right? And you find certain things that you can fill in your own mind, but it's not objectively true. And this is an example of, although film is subjective largely, this is a little bit of an example of an objective truth, because we know that Carpenter said that's not what was going on there. They weren't brother-sister. Laurie wasn't a 2-year-old in a crib in the house in 1963. We know that, so there's nothing in that movie that says that is what's going on, even though you can find little things that help to justify it for yourself as you watch the rest of the sequels. Now, I mean, there's other examples within Halloween, the original, that I'm talking about here. Again, you could say, well, why did Michael follow her across the street? Well, because she just saw all the dead bodies. He's got to go kill her now, right? I mean, you can make that argument. You really can, and in some ways that is probably what was going on. It's not to say that he would never have crossed the street to go after Laurie, but he was in no rush. He was hanging out at the Wallace house the entire fucking movie. He was clearly in no rush. And you could say, well, he crossed the street because he's got to kill her now, right? Because she just saw everything. So, I'm just saying, I'm playing the devil's advocate here, because I just want people to understand that when you start to be so set in your ways that this evidence exists in Halloween, it really doesn't. It actually objectively doesn't exist, because it wasn't created for that, and that's part of the reason why, the Halloween timeline is a shit show, because you make a sequel and you make a story. Usually stories begin with the first installment. Really, Halloween's story as we know it begins with Halloween 2, 1981. And before the 2018 film. Obviously, the 2018 film says all those sequels don't exist and we're going back to the original. Okay, but before the 2018 film, Halloween as we know it, for the most part, even with the 18 film here, really the story began with 2, because everything after 2, it makes sense. Everything is connected to 2, really, because that's where the information came out. 1 is its own thing, and you can watch it on its own merits. You can watch it having it connected, 100%, because you can watch 1 and 2 back to back and it feels like one movie. Yep, I agree with all of you who are going to comment that. I do, because that's what I do, 100%. But it's not needed. So to sum up, basically what I'm saying is that I want people who are, because I see it all over the place, not just in comments to me, but comments on other people's videos and on pages. I see a lot of people who are so passionate and they get so angry and so emotional and so you gotta know this is what says, you gotta see it this way, and look, this is what's happening. But the reality of it is that everything you try to connect from the sequels to the original Halloween will always be subjective and your own personal opinion only, based on what you perceive to exist that helps you justify whatever story they were telling in, 2 and 4 and 5 and 6 and H2O and Resurrection, or whatever the case is, because it actually doesn't exist, because it was its own movie. And then it was so successful, they're like, oh, okay, how do we connect this? Okay, let's take a round peg and put it into a square hole and see if it fits. Or a square peg into a round hole, whatever the fucking saying is. But, and see if it fits. And that's what they did. They went, yeah. So it's like, okay, yeah, it fits, I guess. Sure, let's go with that. Right? And that's essentially what people have been doing for the last, since 1981. So almost 40 years, 38 years. So, it's, I just wish people could come at it from a more of, hey, this is fun, okay, I think this is kind of when I watch them, I think for me, this is kind of, but there's no, it's this. And it's it's not that. What you're saying literally does not exist. It exists for you maybe, but then just cool. It'd be so much better for the people that are just getting so emotional about it You'd feel better if you approached your arguments from a, hey, this is kind of cool. Here's how I kind of see it, And then it's also much more fun to read, because it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. Oh, okay. When I watch it, I kind of think of this, and that's sort of the point of this video, is I want people just to, hey, cool, that so many people. And I'm not talking about anybody specific at all, actually. I just see it all over the place. And I've been seeing it all over the place for a long time. It's really difficult when you try to connect that original movie to the rest of the series. You can do it, take that square peg, put it in a round hole, but it's like, it really is its own thing, at the end of the day. So anyways, folks, my name's Dave McRae. Comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can at facebook.com/manythingsdavemcrae. That's where I tend to post in the meantime and in between time when I'm not posting here. All the links are in the description, as well as my link to my Instagram. I now have Instagram, and in is down there as well, or Insta. I think that's what the young kids say. Hey, Dave, you got Insta? You got Insta? They're abbreviating an abbreviation. Fascinating. Anyway, so I will talk to you guys soon. Alrighty. Cheers.